Welcome to I do this every single time. Episode 23 of Sim Sundays by Gridfinder. You know, your source of weekly sim racing chat, interviews, and a little bit of sim racing. This week we are not doing any sim racing though, kind of like the last two episodes that we've had, just because well, we have a very unique guest on today, and it's a little bit different from our normal sim racing style of show. So, Tom, how you doing today, sir?
I'm good. I'm very good. How are you doing, Chris? Because you always ask me this,
I
and then we never get a chance to ask you how you are.
I am doing great. Well, with the exception of the weather is making a turn for the worse, so outdoor activities are kind of going out the window at this point. But that gives me more time to sit here and virtually steer around tracks and, well, hopefully get better at some point so that when we do actually race on Sim Sundays, I don't just hit a wall or flip a car or do my
Uh-huh.
typical the moment Mike puts me on the screen, crash and burn. You know how that goes.
Yeah. I kind of enjoy it. It's kind of become a little bit I don't want to say iconic because that almost seems a bit mean.
I'm fine with it. If I can make a compilation of all of my crashes at the end of the season, I'm good to go. That's fine with me. I can be the meme of the show.
Right, there's an easy joke here about how it would take a long time to go through the footage and then cut it down to the best ones and then put those out there, but I won't make that joke because that would be mean.
Well, why don't you introduce our guests so we can get them and all the conversations that we were trying to put off during the pre-show to the actual show.
Right. Okay. So this week we have some very exciting guests. From Circuit Superstars, we have two of the founders, the creators, and the designers, Alberto and Carlos from Circuit Superstars. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank
Thank
you
you so
for
much for having us.
thank you for
Yeah,
having
thank you. Thank you for joining. And thank you for in the pre-show accepting the fact that I'm like, let's stop talking about that. We're going to get to that during the show. We
Yeah,
got to keep
Yeah.
that content for the fans and everything.
immediately
'Cause
excited to start talking about racing.
I know, we were saying that it's just really nice that we have such a synergy with our interests when it comes to the guests on the show that it just naturally flows and it gets right into the conversation. And one of the big ones that I'm super excited to talk about is the recent thing that happened in real motorsport. I know this is a sim racing show, but we have to talk about it. That crazy push in NASCAR where he rode the wall all the way around the final corner to get into the championship, right?
Yeah,
What did you guys saw that, right?
yeah, we did, and
What
I I
what
thought
are
it was
you
iconic immediately. One of the most memorable moments of motorsport this year for sure. Uh,
The funny thing is that if you I don't know if you guys were able to catch the compilations from all the other drivers,
mm.
but they were like, "That's straight from a video game. He's sim racing up in here." And like
Yes,
they were all
Yeah.
joking about how literally he took a video game move from like iRacing and just sent
yeah,
it straight down the
yeah.
wall.
Well, it's so common to see it on video games, and but obviously in a video game you have walls that are absolutely perfect, and
Mhm.
you can't help but wonder if that will be possible in real life. So just to see it happen is very special.
I
Yeah,
wa
I
I guess in video games, we never think about the costs, and
No.
that's why everyone does it in video games. There's no actual loss, but the fact that he did it in real life, it's like that's what was so crazy was the just send it, uh,
Just
attitude
straight
that
around the corner and just destroy the car.
yeah.
Yeah.
I always I've been saying a lot recently this little phrase that sim racing has a blessing and a curse, right? And the blessing and the curse is the fact that it's so close to motorsport. So if you think about it, sim racing's blessing is the fact that you can immerse yourself in motorsport in these one-to-one wheel and pedals, like inside the cockpit, racing. Like the physics engines nowadays are incredible. You can get so immersed in the world of motorsport through sim racing, right? That's his blessing. But its
Mhm.
curse is the fact that if you can watch motorsport or almost motorsport, most people would choose motorsport. But this week, it was quite interesting to see the overlap in somebody doing a sim racing move and using the environment with no
No,
thoughts about the cost or the danger and just going for it and doing a sim racing move. That was quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And well, I guess they're gonna have to do something about it because if they leave it as it is, then that'll be the default move for everyone in the last corner of the last lap on
Yeah,
that track, at
just
least.
all of a
Uh,
sudden they'll rework the wall so it's a little smoother so it doesn't disturb the
Yeah,
race as much
yeah,
or whatever. Like,
right.
it's a bit
Or
like
be
the
like,
in Formula One, where it's like, yes, I guess it's legal now, but we have to ban it because otherwise the prices just go up and it's pointless.
Right.
So
do you
it's
guys know Robot Wars? Have you ever heard of has Robot Wars made it across to America?
Robot Wars.
Yeah,
oh
you know, with the
yeah.
guys with the remote control robots
Yeah.
that like have axes and
We've seen the
grinders and stuff.
we've seen the YouTube
Oh,
compilation.
okay, right. So
Yeah.
it was kind of iconic as I was growing up, but I think that NASCAR could take some inspiration from Robot Wars to stop this problem of cars using the walls and just put some like angle grinders that stick out of the side of the walls or some like, you know, like the cheese wedges that flip you up. So if you decide to ride the wall, you
It
just
just
get angle ground and flipped up.
Right.
oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
just
know if the drivers will appreciate that so much, but
But you know what?
so
That's interesting because I can't remember who I was
short
talking to
on stage.
recently. We were talking about sim racing. Oh, no. Do you know it was the episode with Florian Hasper? Do you remember we were talking about? So Florian Hasper from VCO and BS Plus competition, so the BMW sim racing team. We were talking about the future of sim racing and what does it need to do to survive and grow. And he made a really interesting point that it needs to find its own creativity. It can't just try and replicate motorsport because then people just watch motorsport because it'll only ever be almost motorsport. So he was saying that you need to find new kind of creative ways of making sim racing interesting. And I feel like that is kind of what Circuit Superstars is doing, right?
Mm, thank you. Uh, yes. So in many ways it is because the goal of experiencing the joy of participating in a real race um, is a tricky one, right? Like because you got the expenses, you got how far you want to take the immersion aspect of it, and at the same time you're sort of fighting a little bit of an unfixable problem, which is that you cannot get an implicit amount of respect between drivers in a sim racing environment the same way that you can in real life because there's no danger. And so you always have this layer on sim racing where there's like a social contract between all the participants to respect the rules, but you can break them, and there's not the same amount of weight to them.
yeah.
Um, so what we've tried to do is, in a way, um, create a space where the aspects that we thought were most exciting about participating in a race, portraying those and preserving as much as we could, whilst in some way making the interactions a little bit more forgiving, the dynamics of motorsport just a little bit more playful
Yeah.
and lighthearted, but still you gotta be a person who pushes for making consistently fast laps and to think about strategy. And we have a lot of ideas of how to take that concept further and keep evolving it and approach it in a playful way and embrace the medium uh, so that it doesn't feel like a limitation anymore, like a virtue.
I
Yeah,
really
no, I
like
mean,
the overall art direction of I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the Circus Superstars, the way it presents itself reminds me a lot of like the old school RC Pro-Am or off-road
right.
games from the past. And it's interesting because you do still get the feeling of sim racing and the competition and everything. But just like you said, it's more lighthearted and easier to kind of just, I don't know, sit back on the couch with your Steam Deck and go, okay, let's just throw a couple races together instead of be like, okay, I got to get strapped in, let's put on my gloves and put on my shoes and let's
Yeah,
go.
big, big
Like it's just so
commitment,
much
right?
easier, and you still get to experience the racing. Were games like RC Pro Am and maybe off road? Where did you draw inspiration from games like that, or where did you draw your inspiration for the art,
For the art.
for like the style
Well,
and the feel of the game?
right. Many places. we grew up playing all sorts of racing games, all sorts of games really, but racing games were always a particular fascination, and we played everything from the first simulation games. We grew up with the Papyrus games, IndyCar, NASCAR, the Geoff Crammond F1 games. Then 2001, we played the first Gran Turismo, which at first I didn't get it. Like I didn't understand the appeal because there was no damage model, there was no cockpit view. The races only had 6 cars, and I had to do a bunch of races with slow cars in order to get to the fast one. So at first I didn't get it, but eventually it became like I started to understand the appeal and all the car culture. But then we always loved look forward to play the new Mario Kart, and we always had great fights, especially with 2 of our cousins who are also fanatics of racing and sim racing. We had great fights playing Mario Kart and all sorts of arcade games. We played this freeware top-down racing game that came out like 20 years ago called Gene Rally. And then we raced RC cars for a few years.
Mm.
So when we started thinking about making our own game, when we developed an interest in game development, we knew very quickly that it made no sense to attempt to try to do something realistic, because it's an arms race, and you need to learn a lot of stuff before you can do anything remotely good. So we felt as well at the time there was space for a game that was very arcadey, but also very physical, and with a different angle, with a camera that sort of followed the car and let you see it up close. So you get this nice level of detail, and you see the car and the suspension working. So it was very natural. It was sort of how can we bring the flow and the feel of concentration and flow that you get from RC racing, and put it in a format that feels accessible but immersive, and captures all the nice, essential, fascinating aspects of motorsport. And just with experimentation, it started to just to come together naturally. We came along these paper cars made by a Japanese guy. It was called Metmania. And
Okay.
it's these very short wheelbase cars made out of paper, like origami. And we love the style, so we immediately felt like that was very appropriate for the tone of the game. That's sort of arcadey, but not too cartoony, not too
Okay.
not too goofy.
In a way, the art style, we wanted to make it be a reflection a bit of the general approach to motorsport. So the races are short, the tracks are short, the physics are not fully realistic. They're like condensed.
Mhm.
So it made sense to treat the art style in the same way, and we thought Midmania sort of captured that essence of like just shorter cars. And so we've tried to keep the same philosophy going from the game design aspects to the visuals. And it's been a struggle at some times, because the first look of the game is a bit too playful for what people experience once they play it. So that's been a struggle for us. But what we were trying to do, in some ways successful and some others not successful, was to match the level of condensation of motorsport that we were trying to do.
I was just about to bring that up, actually, because it's interesting that you point out that your users have this almost disparity between what they experience in the game and what they see in the visuals before they download it. Because obviously at one end of the spectrum, you've got things like Mario Kart, and then at the other end, you've got things like R Factor 2 and iRacing and Assetto Corsa, and those guys are really, really chasing like the physics models. But what I thought was interesting is your game came out at a similar time, how I perceived it anyway on social media.
Yeah.
It came out at a similar time to Art of Rally, which had a very similar look and feel, and it was almost like there was this huge gap between Mario Kart, where you're firing, blue, red, and green shells at each other, banana skins, all the way up to right. Okay, I need to look after my tires in the last few laps now because I've not got my setup right. But then right in the middle. Okay, maybe to the right of this center, you've got things like Gran Turismo, but actually there's a kind of center-left gap here, assuming that the arcade is on the left, and I don't know why I'm saying left and right, but you get my point, right? There's this spectrum of games from arcade all the way up to simulator, and you fill a gap somewhere between kind of Project Cars, Gran Turismo, and Mario Kart. And it was interesting to see that you and Art of Rally seem to fill this gap at about the same time with very similar art styles. Did you watch that happen? Were you conscious of this space that was left empty, and then did you kind of see a couple of people entering at the same time?
Not so. Art of Rally and Circuit Superstars had been in development for about, I don't know, maybe 7 years before they came out, and they happened to come out sort of at the same time. But yeah, it was more a coincidence than that the fact that we both came out, and I think the fact that we're both indie has puts natural constraints on both of us to stylize the art, because chasing realism and high detail is unattainable for teams of our size.
Yeah.
So I think naturally we've sort of found both a similar solution to a similar problem. And in a way, I think it's very fortunate that both games exist, because from my point of view, I have never seen Art of Rally as a competitor, more like another game to create and cement this new space of sim mid arcade or stylized simulations, or however we want to coin them. And we feel happy to participate in that space, because it can be motorsport and it can be playful, and it doesn't have to chase realism, but the motorsport community could still enjoy it and embrace it. And knowing, for example, we've had the people on the race, the journalism site, they've told us how much they enjoy playing it, and knowing how much they know about the sport and how closely they follow it makes us feel very rewarded by the efforts of trying to entertain an audience that really knows about the sport. And despite being so knowledgeable, they can still find appeal in a simplified and stylized representation of that world.
I really think you guys nailed it with the not going too complex in the graphics or the physics model, because no matter what it is that you love, well, in this case, it's motorsport. There are times where you don't want to be on, we'll say, your A game. Like, you don't want to sit down at a full simulator. You don't want to try as hard as you possibly can to win the race. You just kind of want to sit down, relax, play something a little bit more arcadey, and just genuinely have fun, but in the same exact realm of interest. So this being that fun, playful, still competitive, and really well designed version of that is the perfect gap to fill. Because you're right, Tom, if you think about it, there's not really there's there's Mario Kart, which is a blast there, and then there's ACC, which is also a blast, but you guys fit right in the middle there, and just you fill that. Oh, I'm gonna sit on my couch, I'm gonna watch some TV, but I also want to race a little bit. Let's have some fun here. So
yeah,
that's
in
true.
the beginning, are
Sorry.
you both part of the original dev team, if you will, quote unquote? So the question I have is, like, how did you sit around a table or wherever you were sitting and go, you know what, we're gonna make a game? How did that conversation come to be when you're like, we love motorsport, we love RC cars, we love these other classic games, let's make our own? Because you see those people online that are the Twitter commenters online that they're like, oh, this developer should do X, Y, and Z, and you guys just went, well, we'll just do it ourselves. How did that happen?
I guess we participated in motorsport as we grew up. When I was studying game design, there was a teacher that had something that I always found very impactful. because he said like there's a ton of developers and they all have unique ideas and a lot of will to create, but it always helps if you know what your superpower is. And he would ask us like, "What's your superpower?" And he said, for him, it was like he was a Simpsons fan, and he participated. He was a designer on Simpsons Hit and Run, so his superpower was that
Same.
he was such extremely knowledgeable about the Simpsons that it became his superpower. To be a person who very few designers could challenge his knowledge to make that to participate in that game, right? So for us, I think knowing our background, it felt like naturally the best way to contribute to gaming was to use our history and our knowledge to create something that we had a perspective that we valued in. And so that naturally led us to want to make a racing game. And I guess, yeah, the rest of how we approached the creative process was like what my brother was talking about, like enjoying such a vast, diverse portrayal of motorsport, from Mario Kart to slot cars to RC to karting and to sim racing. I think we found that motorsport could be enjoyed in so many different ways, and we would have a blast every Christmas doing lap times on our slot car track, which we would only put once a year, but we would get extremely into it. Like we would chase the milliseconds, and we know that you don't always need the full simulation of a car to enjoy shaving milliseconds of a system. Whatever you're playing with, it can be a scooter, it can be a slot car, or it can be Mario Kart, and we'll, at least on our side, we know that we would enjoy it. And I think there's a ton of people that would resonate with that. So we never really felt like it was a wild bet to assume that space would exist, because we sort of knew or believed that as long as we created the right environment, it could be entertaining.
Yeah, from what I can remember, holy cow, this is a long time ago now. That was around 2014 when we first started talking seriously about this. The design aspect and the artistic aspect of the game came together quite naturally. We both wanted the same thing, so that wasn't. It was very hard to develop it technically, but we knew what we wanted. We knew in our heads what the result should look like. The difficult thing with this project was everything else, just to build a game and to build a team. We had like the right notions about it, but then up until the time we signed with our publisher, Square Enix Collective, we were partly bluffing, and bluffing to ourselves, like, yeah, of course we can build a game, of course it can be multiplayer, of course, yeah, we can make it cross-platform, yeah, don't worry about it. But then comes a moment when they say, okay, do it, and they called our bluff. So
Right.
now, if we finish a product and we make a fool out of ourselves, we destroy our reputation. Nobody ever wants to work with us again. And so fortunately, in that sense, we feel like we did very well. We put out a product that is in our heads genuinely fun, and it gave us the opportunity to show that we can execute on a vision, and that's the most important thing for this first project. And we now get to do it all over again, to think about it creatively. And I think what you guys were saying earlier is very true, that the racing games can evolve in a very, if you're not attached to simulation and to realism, that creates so much space, and you can do it in many different ways. I think Breakfast is a fantastic example of how you can do it. You can do a game that is sort of realistic, but also very creative and very playful. So we get to think about a process like that again from the beginning, and with a ton of lessons under our belts.
So I'm interested by the very beginning of this journey. So you were saying that you're now starting again, but I'd like to understand more about what the process is. So take us back to 2014. You've got this idea. You think you pretty much know the area you want to go into. You're already motorsports fans and you like racing titles, etc. And you think, okay, well, there's a space here and we can execute on it. Like, what was it in all of your backgrounds which allowed you to then pursue it? Like, what experiences did you have? So Original Fire Games, as far as I can see, there's 5 people, 3 founders, so it's a small team. How do you go from we've got an idea to okay, we now have the budget to execute on that for the next 7-8 years? Like, that's that's no small feat, right?
It wasn't meant to be like that. So, the original journey, I think, so the whole journey has been riddled by a will to create and the knowledge limitations to execute on it. It's been really difficult because we've had so much clarity on what we wanted to make that it becomes easy to know when you're not achieving it. But from the very beginning, it seemed attainable because we didn't know how much we didn't know.
Okay.
So it was like, I saved money for a year. I think I can make a game in a year. And my brother joined me in that phase. So it was just like, I was living in Vancouver and my work permit expired and I went back to Mexico and I had this idea for a game. I sort of talked about it with my brother and we were both enthusiastic about it. I had enough knowledge of programming to think that I could figure it out along the way. And then just started, like I started reading about wheel physics and making little advances bit by bit and making art that we could use to start creating an environment to race in. And just bit by bit, we started to build something that started to look like a game. We had a Kickstarter that failed. We had no social media efforts at that point, so nobody knew about us. We just sort of thought it would work out if we just put it out there, and that was really healthy because the moment we realized we weren't gonna make it, we had begun the journey of putting the game out there and showing it to people. And it became apparent like, this not only do we not have like the social media awareness that we need to get a product out there, but also the quality of the games that were successfully getting a lot of clicks was higher. So we just had to go back to the drawing board and think how we can make it better and how can we grow and learn to improve that vision. And bit by bit we start getting there, and that's how it became such a long journey. It wasn't like we didn't know it would take 7 years. It was always 1 year more. So it was the first year, Kickstarter didn't work out, okay, 1 more year and then we can perhaps release it or try again, and then another year, and then we got a publisher. And then once we had a publisher, okay, we find a way to make a product plan that makes sense, that we believe we can achieve on. And again, we were just always pursuing that belief that we were gonna finish the game in a relatively short amount of time. But there was so much knowledge to build that it took longer than we expected it to.
That's really interesting. That Tom and I are no strangers to it'll take 1 more year, week, whatever. Just one more. It's kind of like the joke online where just 1 more game. That's all I'm queuing online for. Just 1 more game, and then all of a sudden 4 a.m. rolls around. And you're like, what just happened? What's going on here?
Yeah, 7 years just happened.
So in your first Patreon, or not Patreon, I don't know why I went there, but your first Kickstarter attempt, how
Yeah.
did you get like all of the art and everything together if you didn't really have a full-fledged real product quite yet? Was it mostly like still renders in 3D programs? How did you build the
No, I mean, there
Kickstarter
was
up to the point where you could actually say, okay, I think people get the idea of this game. Let's launch
there
this and
was
see if we can get support.
so I guess that's a common thing that is difficult to communicate as a game developer, and for players to differentiate, is that a game is so huge that you can get a playable experience relatively early, and it looks so ready. Uh, so if you get a car that can do laps and you have a track, it seems you have a game. But there's just so many things to build. There's menus, there's customization systems, there's saving systems, there's cloud support and server maintenance and um, translations and console certification processes and adapting to different consoles iconographies. It's just gigantic, and that's why I think, yeah, we had a playable software experience that
Okay.
was not a product, because in order to get a product you just need so many more things,
Right.
and
That makes sense.
it took so long to build the other parts, and that's been what our team has been amazing at. It's okay, the team knows what the core experience we want is. That was sort of already built early on in the project, and it was taking that and making it into a fully fledged product that can be on a Nintendo Switch, it can be in a Steam Deck, it can be in PlayStation, and people can play online and they can invite their friends, and it'll comply with all the console certification aspects, which are plenty. So yeah, no, it's a very daunting journey once you know all the steps you really need to do to get a product to that point. But yeah, to get a, a playable experience, we can call it a game. That happens relatively early in the process, and it's good that it happens early, because it also is important to validate that that experience is fun, because before you start to build everything around it, because if at that stage it's not fun, maybe
Back
not
to the
worth
drawing
to
board.
build
Yeah.
everything else, right? They say that Mario 64, they built Mario in a blank box. It was just like a box.
Huh.
And they wanted to make him fun before they started to build any levels for it. So Mario
Okay.
was fun to move, just to jump and run and dash and duck and all the things Mario does, before they built any one particular level. And I guess we always try to approach games with the same philosophy, where we want to validate that the fun is there early on. So for us, it was just like lapping is fun.
Well, that validates the dream a little bit, and it makes it so that at least it's almost lucky that you didn't know all of the other aspects that you've come to learn over the course of time, because that would be like staring up a mountain when you're at the bottom, instead of just like kind of thinking about going over the hills at the base of it, like getting to the point where you could play it and have fun. And then I bet I can only imagine in your mind when you realized you were enjoying something that you created, the feeling that you got where you're like, this is actually happening. This is actually working. This is actually fun. I bet that was like almost a weight off your shoulders moment, because up until then you'd have no idea if your idea was going to actually function or work or be fun or be a viable product, right?
Yeah. I think there was two stages. One was when lapping became fun. That was a huge relief, because we knew that it took a long time to get there, and to just finally feel like, oh, I'm actually genuinely enjoying it, was a big relief. And also when we got AI in it and we raced, we had a combat experience with someone else in the track. I think that was the second moment when we were quite thrilled that it seemed to be going in a direction that we we're making a product that we could be proud of. Yeah,
Yeah.
bit by bit.
Nice.
I saw Tom speaking, but we couldn't hear you.
Oh no, I think it's. I think there's quite a long. There's a long delay. I'm very far away.
Right.
I was gonna. It's interesting because I feel like making a game is much like starting a business, in that people say that a second-time founder is 1,000 times better than a first-time founder, because a second-time founder knows all the stuff that they don't know. So
Right.
if you could go back to 2014 and tell yourself something, just to warn you, what would it be?
Ooh, oh, that's a good question. But I sort of know what I would do now. But to go back and tell the person back then, I don't know. It would almost be like what Chris was saying, like having a bit um, of belief that is a bit naive was what allowed us to always keep believing. Like if we knew that the size of the mountain, we probably would have been unmotivated or demotivated to tackle it. Just it would have seemed too big. So I don't know what I would say. Like it's all, as he said, it's a blessing to not know all the difficulties that you're gonna endure in a journey, because maybe you won't feel as strong if you knew.
Right.
That's very
Right.
interesting.
It'll be probably cut the features in half, and
All right.
and try to do as much marketing material as possible, and try to put yourself out there as much as possible. Try to expose the game as much as possible. Like treat marketing as one of the as a core part of your business.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that would have been a great advice.
Probably those two things could have made a difference.
That would have been a very good advice.
I mean, you guys have a very devoted community. That was something that struck me about Circuit Superstars. Is when it came out, I noticed that like on Facebook and Twitter, there were loads of people who, when it was, in my eyes, it was being announced, I hadn't heard of it before. There were people who seemed to be like long-term advocates of this game, discussing some of the finer details of it, as if it had been out, as if it was a Assetto Corsa and it had been out for like 15 years, you know, and they knew all the ins and outs of it, and they had the things they liked, things they didn't like, and it was kind of like, you know, we need to back this game, guys. Let's get behind this. It's so great that it's coming out, blah, blah, blah. So how did you create that community, and how important has it been?
I think what happened was that we're a top-down racing game, and top-down racing games don't have a lot of representation. And I feel like from the eyes of the community that has most embraced our game, which is now at this point it's larger than that and more with different backgrounds, but the people who were very excited early on were players who really love either RC or top-down racing games, and even our one of the top competitors in Circuit Superstars still races RC. So I think in a way we tapped into a community that was already there, hoping that a game like this would be made.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see the synergy between RC racing in that, of course. Well, my comparison to RC Pro-Am from the Nintendo Entertainment System days,
right,
are reminded me of that, and the competitive side of it. How did you make it so that, with the simplified physics, with the overall aesthetic of the game, how did you make sure that the competitive aspect of it still shines through, and it's not just like a play game, and, you know, don't take it seriously and crash people out and, you know, be a jerk on the track, if you will? How did you keep the competitive side alive with all of the differences from like an Assetto Corsa or iRacing?
I think at the core is because it still respects the values of what motorsport really is, which is driving quickly around the track and having good racecraft, and a layer, in our case, not as deep, but a layer of strategy. And we also had taken the liberties of, because we're playful, I think we were able to do stuff like the penalty system that we have, which I'm quite happy with, because when I play some racing games, either or I'll use Gran Turismo as an example. You don't always know where the limits are. You'll get penalties where you don't really know when the penalty will come if you go out of bounds on the track. And we put stuff like we have plastic poles wherever you will be penalized. So if you cut them, you know that's the bounce, right? But that's not realistic, so it's not present in all racing games. And I think having a bit of room to be playful or to just be non-realistic has given us ways to place rules that people care about in competitive motorsport, and put them in a way that to us feels intuitive and easy to understand. It's like you don't cut the plastic pole, it's out of bounds. But it really creates a fair playing field. Whereas I don't know if you guys have played Forza Motorsport 7, but you can cut corners everywhere in that game, and it's, I think, an easy aspect for a competitive player to be dissuaded to participate seriously in a game that doesn't feel like it respects the principles of the sport. And I think in that way we put a big focus on respecting the principles, and as long as the other parts are there, hot lapping and racecraft, I think the experience can still come through, even though it's not having a real car in there.
Right.
Oh, we do not have your audio again, Tom.
Oh, yeah.
So, Tom, you're muted. If you can hear us, please fix that. But so the next question I have is wheel support for this game. So obviously it kind of like, it almost suggests that it's a controller only game in a way, right? And I've talked about playing it on the Steam Deck, and that's a fabulous experience. But what about wheel support? Did you guys build in any wheel support into the game, or is that something that you, if you haven't built it, you're thinking about?
No, because that's one of the corners we cut. Right.
Okay.
So on building the physics, we built them with a keyboard. So as long as they felt good on an analog input, and sorry, on a digital input,
just a
we thought we would build something that could scale to controllers, because I don't use controllers very granularly. Just going.
It's like it's all the way or zero. All the way
it's almost
or zero.
all the way, right? Like, yeah, I feel like most players just slam on it. It's difficult to be very detailed, and it kind of gets your fingers a little tired as well if you're very granular with it. So yeah, we built them with that in mind, just digital inputs, and if we were to give a full analog input, like even if it was an RC wheel, I think it would feel like too unresponsive, because it's the game sort of expects 100% inputs all the time.
Okay.
Even if with a wheel, you would be very uncompetitive, because even if you had only 180 degrees, it would take you a long time to go from one side to the other. Whereas the fastest players in circuit tend to use the keyboard, because your inputs are immediate, from 0% to 100%.
Right, being able to change direction.
They're making micro corrections all the time. So yeah, it's a game just thought around using either a keyboard or a gamepad.
Okay.
And I think for us, it's quite an intimidating aspect of building a more realistic physics model that supports wheel, is that if you support wheel, sort of the physics kind of be quite natural with a wheel. But if you want those physics to feel great with a controller, there's a lot of magic that games like Gran Turismo do in order to make the controller feel good. Because if you see the input that the controller is sending to the game, they're not like there's a lot of wizardry on how much steering you do at high speeds, and how long the the internal sort of driver will start to steer the wheel for you if you just slam on the controller.
Yeah, because there's a limit to the rate. It won't be just 100%, 0%. It's okay, this driver's going to progressively turn until they hit 100%.
Yeah, and it feels good in those games. So for us to know that that's a thing they developed and they put a lot of thought into, makes us know that it's an entire feature. And for us, we intend to understand it in the future and know how to do it, but it's not something we know yet how. And if we were to build something that's a little less realistic, we would definitely do that early on, to try and understand how to make physics that feel great with an analog input that's very progressive, but also be able to remap that and properly land it on a gamepad in a way that feels really great. Because
makes sense.
Even I think games like Assetto Corsa took a while to feel good on a gamepad, and I think now that they're on console, they feel pretty good. But
it's
not on the early stages, I don't think.
It's very impressive. It's almost like the game guesses what your intention is. So, sorry, I've been coughing for the past 2 weeks.
No, you're fine.
When you're traveling really quickly and you make a very sudden turn with the joystick, the car will move only very slightly. So it's almost limiting what you can do depending on what the car is doing at the time. So it's very advanced driving aids. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it's like automotive companies. If they took a look at what they're doing, it would be interesting for them.
Yeah, you can drive the game the car's really steady.
Don't say that to Elon, because all of a sudden you'll drive your Tesla with a PlayStation controller.
Yeah.
So the decision to kind of drop wheels, if you will, that sounds weird, but to not support a driving wheel, was that a conscious decision that in the beginning you just went, no, we're not going to support those in any advanced fashion other than the fact that like I could remap it to pretend to be a controller? Was that like an A and B decision? You said we could go with it, but we're actually not going to? Or was it just kind of well, it's probably too complex for us to be able to add to this game at this point in time with our team?
Yeah, it was a combination of the two. Like, it didn't feel like the right fit for the product.
Okay.
And it didn't feel like a challenge we were ready for or that we needed to tackle, because it would have required the physics themselves to be different.
Yeah.
And it was difficult enough, let's say, to make them fun for a keyboard and a gamepad, that having a layer of support for something we didn't really believe it needed, it just made it very easy to know that it wasn't a challenge we were down to solve.
I like that approach, because that approach is knowing your identity and being able to cut off advanced features that are probably just going to end up putting you into the weeds and make it even longer. One more year, right?
Yeah.
Because it's almost like if you guys were to decide to support wheel, it's like that TV show that has like 2 seasons too long after it should have already ended. Like, it didn't really need that extra stuff, so just stop, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, a bit like that. Mm-hmm.
So what is next for Circuit Superstars? I mean, where's your trajectory going? Because you did mention earlier in the podcast the first product, so it sounds like there's something in the horizon, in the back of your minds on a whiteboard somewhere that we can't see. But what's next? Yeah,
so obviously we want to keep supporting Circuit Superstars, and we have a new launch for the Nintendo Switch, which we feel it's the perfect platform for it. So we're excited to see it ship there, and hopefully have the community embrace it, and hopefully it grows.
I can say from a Steam Deck player, the Nintendo Switch is perfect for it, because the Steam Deck is a Nintendo Switch, really, that plays PC games, obviously, right?
Right.
Well, some people might get mad at me for saying that, but you know what I mean. But Nintendo Switch, like putting it up on its little kickstand, having 4 controllers. Now, will it be 4 players at the same time as well?
Yeah. It's 30 frames per second on 4 split, but still 60 for a single player. Like, it's still the same experience, and it was very difficult to get there. But for us to have a game on the Nintendo Switch that can feel like motorsport, it's a huge achievement, and so we're very excited to put it there.
Well, and
And
then
then
the support for driving games on Nintendo Switch is what, Mario Kart?
there's Grid now. There's a few more, but yeah, it is not. It has not been an easy platform for racing games, I think.
Yeah.
Because naturally, there's always like a very high demand for graphics and simulation, and putting those in a chip that isn't super powerful becomes really difficult for everyone. And it was difficult for us, but I think because we have always known that the game doesn't need high end visuals and high end simulation in order to successfully be the product it wants to be. We very early on knew that it should be on Switch, and so we made decisions early on for that. And for the next products, so we're, as you said, like a second time entrepreneur is how many times was it? 100 times better. For us, making a game where we can take all the lessons that we've taken from our first title is extremely exciting because we see so much growth in us as a team.
Yeah,
that we really want to explore that, and we still feel that the space that you guys have signaled that we're occupying has a lot of room to grow. So we would love to explore something in that space where it's not realism, it's not Mario Kart, but it's still very, very true to motorsport. And we would love to keep participating in that space, growing it, and hopefully making something that can have a large community to embrace that next game.
Now, Grid Finder is obviously a league management or a league promotion system. Now, we don't have very many Circuit Superstars leagues on there, but it would be very cool to build it up and with your guys' help in putting it together so that we can promote more Circuit Superstars and get more people involved in the game, because the game is just, it's fun. It's that perfect break from sitting at your computer and trying as absolute hard as you can to get the fastest lap on a sim, and then you just sit back and you could still try to get the fastest lap, but you're just relaxed and you have a controller in your hand. There's no wheel support, so that's probably even better, honestly, because I'd be the guy who's like, well, let's put a wheel on this thing and let's try it.
Right.
And then it'd be more stressful again, and you're sitting in your rig still. So I think there's a lot of room for growth for you guys, and I think that
Hopefully,
even if your next product is something in the same vein, I think this style of racing has a lot of potential.
Yeah, we definitely want to keep supporting the community to fulfill that premise, and we're still working on the game. There's a ton of leagues that have opened up recently, and I'm gonna work with our community to make them aware of Grid Finder, to make it easier for new players to join them, because they go through our Discord, and sometimes they're like, what do I do? And it depends a bit on whether the community responds to them, if they find it, or maybe like if they don't get a quick response, maybe they leave, and then they didn't find a community to play with. So having a space where they can find those leagues a bit more centralized would be amazing for our community. So yeah.
For driving games, I mean, I don't even remember what the oldest game that we have in the repertoire right now or whatever, but communities keep these games alive for basically ever. As long as there's a community around it that wants to race it, it never stops being, raced in. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So
hopefully. Yeah, I was gonna say, seeing how the community has kept alive games like Grand Prix 2 and Grand Prix 4 and Richard Burns Rally, that's incredible. They not only create content, they make the game better. Like they revamp the physics, and they just create a whole thing and keep it alive. With regards to Circuit, we'll always be very supportive and pay a lot of attention, do everything we can to support competitive efforts. And then we live in a very nice time where if you find a way to improve the game in any way, then you can implement it and people can update it immediately. So we'll keep doing that as well. Like every single bit that we learn and can be applied to the game, we'll always do it.
So
It's a bit tricky because of the console pipeline. We need to go through like all the certifications, like the 4 different
I was
platforms.
just going to ask about
we went
mod
PC
support.
only.
Yeah,
Oh,
and you
yeah,
can't
yeah,
have
yeah.
mod support because of crossplay, right?
So you can. There's ways to do it, and we've talked to a few companies that can help with mod support for consoles. So essentially, you can get a pipeline in place where people could mod the game on PC, upload it to a server that can deploy those files as a patch into
Okay.
console. And then the cross-platform nature makes it quite tricky, and there's a lot of layers to go through with certification. We could also make it so that only PC versions can be modded, but then it would kind of be need to be communicated at like, oh, you have a mod, this won't work with cross-platform, right? So it's a tricky problem to solve.
Yeah, it's tricky, but we're looking into it.
Okay.
And if we find practical solutions, then it's something that we surely will bring forward.
See, I think that's what's the great thing about indie developers versus like a AAA developer, someone huge, because the community can actually give you a little bit of feedback and then you can look into it, and it's a viable option to be added to the game, like mod support. But if you were to go to one of the AAA developers, as we call them in the world now, your voice wouldn't be heard ever, unless all of a sudden somehow you got trending on Twitter, and then it would just be ignored anyways.
yeah, it's difficult, right? Because they're sort of like big ships and they move very steadily. It's not as easy to be agile with such big teams, and I definitely understand their process and why it's difficult for them to react to feedback. But yeah, on our side, it's definitely a thing to embrace, having that agility to be able to react to player feedback and have a discussion with the team like, hey, this is something that came up with the community. Let's talk about it and see if it makes sense. And ultimately, like not always, we find a way to make it. Either it's out of bounds for our scope or our team's ability to support it with the time constraints and all. But we're always discussing things that come up from the community, and more often than not, they come into our plans in some way or another. Either that's because we find we've gone through moments where we find a solution to like 5 different complaints that it's like, oh, we don't like this and that, and then we don't address any of them. We address this other thing that sort of addresses them all at once. At least we've tried to do that as best we can. Yeah.
Now, how big is your team? If you feel like sharing that, you can. Obviously, you don't have to, but I'm curious. As an indie developer, how many developers and how many people do you have on your staff? I guess I would say. I don't know.
So we're 5 at the moment. At the biggest stage, we were a team of 7.
Okay.
I think
that's a small team.
7 was the largest.
It evolved, and
wow.
Well, our sister Caro, Alberto, and myself have been there naturally since the very beginning. John has been with us since when we first started working with our publisher. So
we
that
founded
was
the company
January 2019, so almost 4 years now.
Oh wow!
And there's been a couple of engineers that were there for a while, and they're not there anymore. But at the moment, it's 2 engineers, John, Andrew, both brilliant, Caro, Alberto, and myself. And well, for the next project, depending on what we do, we will probably need to grow the team a little bit.
That's absolutely astonishing sometimes when you hear about these indie developers and the size. For some reason, 7 even is smaller than I was anticipating, even when you were at your largest. I don't know why. Right. In my mind, I'm like, oh, an indie team's probably like 20 or 30 people, right? Like that's just to build a game. There's so many things that need done. It has to be that many people, right? But Wow, that's
Yeah, five
a
five
tiny
is
little team
definitely
doing.
really small. So when we were seven, we were so Carlos and Chicho were the main art team, and I was like partially in art. So my role has always been a bit like part in split in three. I do a little bit of engineering, a little bit of art and design,
Hmm.
and then my sister Carol, she's always involved in design of the game and helps us build it, but also like she's the studio lead. She manages and keeps the studio going and all the operations
Yep.
running smoothly. And she's incredible at reaching out and keeping healthy relations with people around us. And yeah, she just she takes on so much. And we've John the engineer that's been with us since we started the company. He knows the code base inside and out. Like he's been there for every single part of it. Like any part that I've participated in, he's also aware of.
Hmm.
If I participated in writing physics, for example, and the AI, and he rewrote them to make them faster on the CPU and lighter and so he's aware of every part of the game, and he's extremely knowledgeable. And Andrew, he's been with us for about 8 months now. It's the first time he's in games, but he's such a petrol head. He
There you
was
go.
making RC modifications to cars with Arduino chips for a while, and like he can do them. He can make them have blinkers on, and like he's just been doing all this creative work surrounding cars for so much of his life that it's been a joy to just find a team member that even though he's new to games, like he just fits so naturally with creating content and systems for it. And we had Phil Wardrow for how long was he with us? Like 2 years, maybe about 2 years. And he's the one who worked very closely on all the matchmaking and
Okay.
lobby systems. And before he left, he worked on the ranking systems as well. Um, so yeah, yeah.
The next project, are you staying within racing, do you think, or do you have an idea to go beyond the track, if you will?
We've thought about experiences that we would be keen to build that are not necessarily motorsport, but
Okay.
we always gravitate to racing, like in some way, move
Okay.
at speed,
Yeah.
or manage momentum in some way. So we've talked about like broomsticks and like crazier things, but
Do, do
um,
you remember there was a unicycle racing game on Nintendo, Super Nintendo back in the day. I can't remember what the game was
really
Oh, was
called.
it? I
unicycle.
don't think I ever saw it.
It was, yeah, you didn't have a rider on it, but it was just
Mm,
like it was a side-scrolling unicycle game where you just went through, it was almost like a marble maze kind of a track.
mm.
And
Right.
that game was pretty interesting. If I can
Oh,
find a YouTube video after the show, I'll go ahead and message it to you guys so you can see it. But I
I
had a
do.
blast in that game when I was a kid. I
Mm,
put so many hours into that game for no reason
Amazing.
other than just to get the fastest time on every track.
Mhm.
So I understand your desire to keep coming back to racing again, because I don't know, there's something about racing that's like you don't necessarily have to play against other people. You can even just time trial yourself, and then you're
Mhm.
racing against yourself, and there's
Yeah,
no outside competition except for just
right.
being the best version of you on that track or on that whatever you're racing on. And
Yep.
it's addicting in a way.
it's so measurable, the
Yeah.
progress. That's why it becomes so compelling to keep going in. Yeah, I totally agree. Um, we've built so much knowledge on how to build racing games at this point
Yeah.
that also like we're we love games. We we've talked about RPGs and like how fun it would be to tell stories, for example, and how fun it would be to inhabit towns that we build where there's like a little hotel, perhaps. So as people who love games, we are always like keen to explore and talk about different types of games. But I think the constant is that we always really gravitate to valuing the knowledge and the unique way to build racing experience that we believe we have,
Sure.
and we want to nurture that and keep growing in that space for the foreseeable future. And maybe instead of like jumping off the space, just integrate some of the other interests we have into that. So
Okay. Yeah.
maybe we make a racing game that has that little hotel one day. Who knows?
Yeah, it's all it's early stages, and we're playing with many ideas, but it will very likely be about vehicles.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, since you know the size of the mountain, as we were talking about before, how it was a benefit to you not knowing how much of a task or how large of a task you were about to embark on. Now that you know it, does it feel more intimidating to make a decision to make another game, or is it this weird mixture of, well, we know what the size of the mountain is, but we also know how to climb it correctly, so it
Yeah,
doesn't seem
right.
as daunting?
Yeah. So there's you want to answer that? Yeah.
As you wish. It's been a huge learning process, so we understand every area of development much better. So we're not stabbing in the dark anymore. So we're able to make much better decisions with the design of the game. We know what each new feature will entail, and we're much better at scoping the project and planning and understanding what are the aspects that need to be working very well for us to say, okay, let's invest the next year of our lives or next 2 years building this because we know it makes sense and it's fun and people will likely enjoy it.
Mhm.
Well, just make
And
sure
then-
that when the statement of one more year comes through, you just get a good laugh over it when you're one more year, oh, one more year, oh, one more year.
The other aspect is that we do know the size of the mountain, but we don't want to climb as tall anymore. So
Oh, okay.
at least for our future project, I don't think we want to. Ideally, we don't want to tackle multi-platform release at
Mm,
once. We would love to have a single platform be the space where we can iterate at a lot faster rate than if you have the game released everywhere at once and it's cross-platform, you're quite limited.
okay.
And our game is quite outrageous because I don't know if you guys can have a game. I know one, but that is 4 player split screen online cross-platform, because
That's a
that's
lot.
like extremely difficult to build, and we don't want to do it again because it was so difficult. And I think it's valuable, and of course there's going to be a lot of players who enjoy it, but for us, I think the majority of players we see don't utilize the full extent of those features.
Right.
Yeah.
So at least in the beginning stages, we want to perhaps consider not doing split screen, for example. That would be
Okay.
like a huge benefit for us. But also multi-platform. It was a huge endeavor for us as a first project. We really didn't have a lot of room to learn from our PC release before we had to jump into console. So we want to give ourselves that space as well. So cutting a little bit on the scope of the project will help us polish the experience a lot further for any future titles we do before we put it on other platforms. And also the mountain. We left some ladders. So
left some
there's some
rope
stuff that's
bridges.
already built. We don't have to climb as hard. Like um, we know how to make so many things now that even if it's a tall part of the mountain the first time, we'll climb it easily the second time. So
Yeah.
it's a combination of all those things that gives us a ton of confidence to tackle future projects as well. And makes it just extremely exciting to think, oh, we got all this learning. Like it just makes it really appealing to start to imagine how a product could look like with all those lessons. And we're excited to both bring those lessons as keep them coming back to Circuit Superstars and keep the product getting healthier and healthier,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time also build something brand new with all the learnings we have. Some of them we can't bring into Circuit Superstars, for example.
Oh, okay.
Just because of different things that are already in place that are difficult to change once it's built. But it's exciting to try and like even from like the camera, for example. It's a thing that can give us reduce the amount of players that can feel comfortable with our game. So the fact that it's top down, we don't know what the ratio is, but my guess is like about half people don't feel comfortable with it.
Okay.
So that would be a space that we would be keen to explore, like a different camera. Yeah. So those are some of the lessons we want to explore for future games.
So if you had to pick a platform right now, which one would you pick? Out of
PC.
all the platforms that you have available?
PC.
Yeah. PC? Okay.
Yeah. I'm excited about the Steam Deck. I'm excited about Proton as well. Like
yep.
The software that enables the Steam Deck to exist, I think it's exciting on its own. The fact that you can run Windows games without Windows is groundbreaking, I think. So I'm imagining that it's gonna extend the possibilities of how Windows games can be played, and it makes our lives a little simpler because people are essentially playing our games on Linux, right? At this stage, and that's exciting. So the combination of how good a platform's team is and their technology, yeah, I'd be keen to explore that again. But as well, like we're open-minded and we want to keep like conversations open. And if there's opportunity to be on a different platform, we would consider it. But we definitely do incline to PC if it was a choice we needed to make now.
Gotcha.
Learned loads about this process as a team, right? So you've been through this process and you've made loads of mistakes, as every team does, and then you learn from those mistakes. And as you said, you leave the rope ladders up for the next time you climb the mountain, which is an analogy that I absolutely love, by the way. I'm going to steal that one in the future. But presumably you must be learning quite a lot from your own community. You must have a lot of analytics built in, not just for the user data and how much people are using it and that sort of statistics, but maybe even like the behaviors of how the gamers are using the game. Has anything surprised you about how people interact with what you've built?
I think it's been a pleasant surprise how much they've embraced competition, and how much they've surpassed our ability to support them in their ambition to create a competitive space, because they go so fast. Like there's a few users that got to know each other from the community, and one of them took the initiative to start building an app, for example. And so but the app doesn't have the support that it needs in order to extract all the information they want. So we're thinking of how to support them. But yeah, like they go a little, they always touch the parts where we're not. And then they ask, like, could you be here? And we try and adapt, right? But they definitely have big ambitions for how they see this game growing. And the community absolutely loves engaging with each other through the game, and they do all sorts of activities together. At some point they had a race where everyone was 100% damage, and it was just like a turtle race, and it just made it so that the only thing that mattered was like taking the absolute shortest path, because there was no momentum or slip, tire slip in any way. So it's just we're like trying to find the perfect line. Um, so yeah, no, the watching them interact with the game in that space has been a joy, and I'm now curious at how the game will be on Nintendo Switch, because I'm expecting there's going to be a younger audience playing the game, and I very much look forward to watching kids play and how they interact with the game. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's been the surprise has been mainly how helpful they are, and the moment they start playing it, they find all of the possible shortcomings or small bugs that are in there. They find them extremely quickly, and then they've been extremely helpful since the beginning and very respectful. And they say, "Okay, I found this, and I think these are the ways that I suggest that you could address that." And then they also embrace newcomers in a very nice way, and they make sessions where they teach them how to drive, and they sort of teach them the rules of the community and why driving clean instead of just dive bombing on the first turn. So
that will always be a problem in racing.
How helpful they've been to us and to others.
Yeah. Tom, we couldn't hear you. I think you asked something.
I was going to say, this is the interesting thing, I think, about the space you're in at the moment, in that gaming has gone from single player to multiplayer as, gaming has gone online. But now gamers are changing their behaviors from being happy with racing multiplayer with random people that they've never met before and they'll never meet again. Now people want to race in communities, and gamers want to game in communities because they want more in-depth stories. So rather than racing against someone and they're like, oh, okay, this is somebody I don't know, this is just a car that I've just overtaken, now they can say, oh, this is the guy that beat me last week, but only just, and I've just overtaken, there's 2 laps to go. There's a whole load more nuance to every aspect of the game. Like every element that you're interacting with, in this case is other cars, they're characters now, not just cars. And I feel like the space that you're in is perfect to kind of capitalize on that.
I think you touch a very beautiful aspect of racing games and online competition, which is that storytelling. And something we really love to enable is these moments that become a bit of a story. And it has actually made some questionable decisions, especially, I think, as a designer, I was very stubborn to implement certain things that I thought would harm the capacity for the game to tell those stories. So, for example, I was very adamant to add a restart button to the game, because from my point of view, I thought if there's a restart button, they're gonna restart the first corner until they pass everyone on the first lap, and then there's no story. So I want them to just play the race, beginning to end, and see what happens. And they hated that.
Yeah.
Didn't enjoy it, and but I think there's always like a good balance between good user experience and good design, where you let players go through some adversity, and I think that's the balance for us as designer is creating systems that feel challenging but not punishing. And I think punishing is sort of like in the realm where you feel it's like unfair for your time, and challenge is just like when maybe you do experience difficulty, but you embrace it and you feel your time is well spent. And it's not a balance that it's always easy to find. I actually find that sim racing can be quite punishing because it's so time invested. Or like if you crash in iRacing on an early lap, like that can be heartbreaking, right? So I think in the space that they're in, it's necessary to create that sense of responsibility with each other and clean driving. But it's difficult for a broader audience to accept those parts of a simulator. And I also think that's somewhere where Circuit Superstars can fit, where you can, even if you want to compete, it can be a bit of a more uh, less punishing experience to have a bad race, because races are short. If you have a bad one, a new one can start in a few minutes.
Right. Forget about that last one. That's where the continuous one more game, because you don't want to end on a bad game, so you play another
Yeah.
Right.
and another
Yeah.
and another.
Yeah.
So presumably you guys have played your own game hundreds, thousands of times over, and maybe actually, you know, I might be wrong. Maybe you work on it so much you don't want to play it in the evenings or when it came out. But in all the times that you've played your own game, what's been the most memorable moment that you've created in the game? Something that you've done in your own game that stuck with you, and why?
Oh.
For me, it was the couple of races where I managed to beat one of the fastest drivers in the community. Just barely, but I beat him on a couple of races at least. So just I guess there was this one day when we had the first track finished at the standard that we released with, that we released the tracks with. The first model of a car finished in the standard that the cars are finished, and we attached a helmet as well. That day, that evening, I couldn't stop playing, and it was just me on my own, not even with the AI lapping with me. It was just one car, just me lapping, and I couldn't stop. So that's probably the most special memory. The time where we had a car with physics finished, a proper car model in there, rendered as they look in the game, the track looking as they do. So just putting the whole package together and feeling like it could be something that had proper potential.
Yeah. For me, I think there's, as Charlie says, like some certain milestones of development were very memorable for us. The moment it began to be fun to lap, or the moment we had the first race against AI, but also like the first few times we played with our community. I think those were extremely memorable, because it was just like a heightened level of excitement that we had never experienced with our game before, where it was like, oh, I actually am being, like, we were rarely challenged in the beginning because we had so much experience. We were quite good at it. So we would not feel that excitement easily. But the moment the community got fast, we played with them, and then they started to be faster. We started to want to chase them, and then to finally be in that position where you're like, oh, actually wanting to shave up, like find that time that you were not trying to find when you were on your own. That became really exciting for us, and became like really expanded the dimensions in which we could interact with our own creation. Yeah.
So if some new players are joining in after the podcast, or however they find you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with the Circuit Superstars community and kind of get started, you know, racing in leagues if they want to, or just, you know, interacting with other players? Where's the best place to do that? At Discord, Reddit, just Twitter? Where do typically your users hang out?
Discord. So on Discord, they're always hanging out, and they will point you to, like, the community will also point you to the right, like, community within the Circuit Superstars community. So if you're German, they're probably gonna point you to the German Circuit Superstars, which is like one of the most competitive ones.
Oh, okay.
And they will like point you to the right places, and like depending on where you're at, where you're at with your time zone, they may point you to specific people as well.
Okay.
So just popping up in Circuit Superstars Discord and saying hi, I want to join a league, like they'll definitely embrace that and point you in the right direction.
And then what's the easiest way to find the Circuit Superstars Discord? Just by going to your website, or are you one of the publicly available ones that they can search in Discord?
So we have links on our link tree to all the different stores and Discord as well. And we got on Circuit Superstars Twitter. We also have the links. But
Okay.
Yeah, I think let me see. Once you join the Discord, you forget.
Okay, so if they were to Google search Circuit Superstars, they'll be able to probably find your socials or somewhere to get connected with your communities.
Yes, for sure. At least
good.
I believe we can. Yeah. Maybe we need to make it a little bit more apparent in our Circuit Superstars. The link is definitely here, but it's quite all the way down. Yeah, that's a good thing to point out. It's a bit small and all the way down. So
maybe after the podcast, we'll have a discussion on getting you guys connected with a Grid Finder.
Yes,
account, so they can go to Grid Finder and then join in your communities and kind of get an easy pathway into there, since there's a lot of the audience will be sim racers and already on Grid Finder, so they can find you there as well.
Yeah,
absolutely. Is there
tremendous?
And we really do think that people who enjoy sim racing, if they give Circuit Superstars a try, they'll find something to enjoy as well. And maybe not all of them. Maybe for some, it's too important to pursue that realism. But I think there's a good amount of players that can enjoy the racing in Circuit Superstars.
I'm ashamed to say that I didn't give it the time of day until we did book the interview, and then I downloaded it and played it, and it's a lot of fun. It's a very, very fun game, and I didn't expect it to be as fun as it is, to be honest with you. You guys did a fabulous job designing just a game that is easy to sit down and have a good time with. And I haven't even raced with any communities or anything. It's just been on my Nintendo Switch, sitting on the couch while the TV is on, just having a blast. So
thank you,
with that.
Thank you.
Well done with that. We're about done with the podcast at this point for time. Is there anything else that you want to share with our community or your community before we go ahead and call it a day?
Wish we could have an announcement, but unfortunately our announcements have been a bit delayed for circumstances outside our control.
That's okay.
But I think it's been a pleasure to talk with you guys. I look forward to exploring Grid Finder and seeing if our community can embrace a way for people to find each other and play, because I think there's been a lot of joy when they do for them coming their way. Like once they find a community, it seems like they really enjoy it. And
I think we could work together to build the communities even more for you guys, and really start to make people not only joining your Discord to be able to find the specific community that they want, but also just being able to go to Grid Finder and find all the different ones that are available to them, and kind of do their own research and find them through just normal everyday internet browsing. That'll be very cool.
Yeah, not even I keep up with all the leaks sometimes.
Well, it's kind of hard too. Yeah, no, that's a good thing. That's a good problem to have, because if there's only one, then you would be keeping up with it all the time, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, on my side, players can expect that there's more coming from us in the future. We definitely want to continue. We love making games. We love the creative process, and we very much look forward to talking about developments for Circuit and developments for whatever our next project ends up being.
Yeah.
Tom, do you have any last questions for the guys?
Thank you very much. It's been really interesting. I think this is only the second podcast we've had from somebody from within the game. So we had Aris from Kunos, the physics designer, which was very, very cool. And then all of our other guests have always been people kind of around the game. So either the streamers or the esports managers for F1 teams, or the drivers, or we had, the CEO of Trak Racer. So kind of all the peripheries around sim racing. But it's always incredibly fascinating to talk to the people who are actually building the experiences. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. It was very fun.
You may want to talk to Dune, the developer of Art of Rally. He's good friends of ours, and he's a joy to talk to every time. It's an
Great.
We would love to if we could
Let's
get
set
an
it up.
introduction. Let's do it.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
set it up.
absolute make a bunch
Okay,
of-
well,
he's amazing.
if you're looking to check out Circuit Superstars, which I wholeheartedly recommend, it's
Thank you.
a fabulous addition to your sim racing kind of repertoire, if you will. And is it available on Steam? I know it's on Steam because that's where I bought it, but is it available
Yeah.
on other platforms as well?
It's available
Well-
on Xbox and PlayStation.
Mhm.
And Switch is yet to be announced when it's going to be available, but it is going to be
Okay.
available. Yes.
Well,
For
there you
sure
go.
it's
And then
gonna be
we can
available.
all play against each other too. So it doesn't matter what platform you're on, you can play with each other and against each other
Yep.
and join leagues. And it's not
That
only
is true.
one platform for competitive play. But,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
cross
That's right.
platform. You can join leagues from any one platform. You can pop in the custom lobbies, so they can welcome you from any place you're coming from.
That is
Yes.
awesome. Well, we really appreciate you guys being on the show, and maybe when you want to do the announcement of your next game, if it is in the racing world, then maybe do another interview and you
Oh,
can do
we
an
would love
official
that.
announcement with us.
That would be fantastic. Thank you. Yes,
Naturally.
absolutely.
Thanks again, guys. This episode will be released on podcast services on next Sunday morning. So if you missed something on the live stream, go ahead and pull it up on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. That'll do it for today. And thank you guys again. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
inviting us. It was a pleasure to talk with you guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.